Welcome to Raging Bullets, a DC Comics fan podcast, episode 254. Welcome to Raging Bullets. I'm Sean Whalen, drnorge on the comic forums, and I'm joined as always by my co-host Jim, the sensei of the whatnot Segulin, and the Duke of You Know. I want to first thank everyone for their patience on this episode. This week in Ohio, we got hit with major storms. We also got hit with some flooding. My basement got flooded. I had power outages. It's been a crazy week. I was really scrambling to make sure we got this final episode of April out. We are joined by longtime friend of the show and colorist Art Lyon as we discuss his work on Batman Widening Gyre, the transition from comics to having just print to trades and now digital, and what all those options mean for comics. We talk about some of his upcoming work on Project Superman. We talk about some work on Sam Hill, and just the character of Batman in general. We have an in-depth discussion about what it was like to work on in Widening Gyre, Batman from a variety of different eras, and as a colorist, what it's like to approach that type of character that way. We also have some listener emails and voicemails. We have a second segment with Art Lyon that we recorded about Smallville that will be on our next episode. So it'll be good timing with the next couple weeks of Smallville being the end of the show. I want to shout out DCBService.com. DCBService.com is going to be in the next couple of days putting up the new orders for the month of May. But I want to remind everyone, if you haven't already ordered Flashpoint Project Superman, friend of the show Art Lyon is the colorist on this. Gene Ha's doing the art, and the plot is by Scott Snyder with a script by Lowell Francis. It's regularly $2.99, 40% off only $179. DCB service is really fantastic if it's something you forgot to order, with placing something on your order if you missed it. If you aren't getting this one, make sure you pre-order this and support Art Lyon and his work. I think it's really great. And also over at InStockTrades.com, you can pick up, if you didn't get to read it, Batman Widening Gyre hardcover. This collects the full 6-issue miniseries from fan-favorite writer Kevin Smith, as Bruce Wayne gets reacquainted with former girlfriend Silver St. Cloud, who attempts to teach Bruce about trust. Batman takes on a mysterious new partner in his fight against crime in Gotham City. But will his attempt at trusting someone cause him to be rewarded or punished? This is 176 pages, Kevin Smith, Walter Flanagan, Art Tiber, and covers by Bill Sienkiewicz and Gene Ha, and of course colorist and friend of the show Art Lyon. Regularly $19.99, 38% off, only $12.39. It's a great way to read the book if you haven't. It's a gorgeous volume. Also remember that our friends over at DCB Service and InStockTrades.com are running the Summit City Comic Con. That's SummitCityComicCon.com. Make sure to check it out. James, what kind of a podcast are we?
Well, Sean, we are a spoiler podcast. We go in-depth in the plotline, story twists, and whatnot of the comics we're reviewing. So if we go over something you haven't read, you may want to come back later so you can better enjoy the show.
To the Batmobile. Let's go. Atomic batteries to power. Turbines to speed. Here, ready to move out.
Joining us is longtime friend of the show, Art Lyon, and colorist. And Art, welcome back to Raging Bullets.
Thank you for having me back. I'm always happy to provide content for listeners because I am one of those listeners.
Last time we talked to you was on the great book, The Shield, which I still miss to this day.
I miss working on that book. I loved working on that book.
The book that I wanted to really start us off talking about today is Batman Widening Gyre. First 6 issues were solicited, and they came out, and it had a natural breaking point. There was a great cliffhanger at the end of issue 6 that kind of leaves us going, where is this going to go from here? And is this character still going to be with us? Widening Gyre, I rebought it this weekend on the app, the DC app. And really the only reason why I rebought it, because I have all the issues, was I love the series. I thought it was just terrific. I'm a big fan of Englehart and Rogers, Strange Apparitions, Silver St. Cloud, Dark Detective. So this, for me, was like coming home reading this series. It was beautifully drawn. The artwork you guys put together, the color work, everything was fantastic. So many great emotional Batman moments in this series. What is it like? I know you're now working on volume 2. Mm-hmm. But what was it like working on the first 6 issues for this series as a colorist? Because this is a big deal series.
It is kind of a big deal, I guess. I really enjoyed working on it. I don't usually read Batman comics as a rule, not because I don't like Batman or because I don't like the writers or artists working on it, but it's just there's this whole Batman universe, and I just worried that if I start reading some Batman, I will either A, get lost, or B, start buying a whole bunch of stuff. And so I tend to I'll read like an arc here or there, or I'll pick up a trade, or I'll flip through things at the store, the local store. And I got this gig, the first 6 issues, and I started reading the scripts, and I thought, well, this is a really weird take on Batman. This is like a weird approach. The style of humor is unusual for Batman. And I think maybe that threw off some readers. But after a couple issues, I really started enjoying it. It really struck me as it's unique. It's a really unique take. Well, really unique is redundant, but it's a unique take on Batman and his personality and his relationships. And it really is a story about relationships. There's all these flashbacks with different Robins and Dick Grayson.
Well, you mentioned the unique humor in the series, and one of the things that I really liked about it, it matched, to me, the story direction. Because this is a unique scenario for Bruce, in the sense that he's got a relationship going, and he's looking at the possibility of, can I hang this up? Can I go part-time with it? Batman has been my life. Now I've got this person, Silver St. Cloud, in my life who has the potential to be my future. Can I hang this up? What will Gotham be like? How does my mission keep going without that? And you see him seeing the world in a different way, seeing that possibility of actually being able to be happy.
Mm-hmm. It's an interesting story. I don't think you would have been able to tell this story before 1 year later, because I think that this is a Bruce Wayne who has really rethought things. He looks at his role in the world, I think, differently, and he has more of a sense of family and of legacy and of the importance of his relationships, his friendships, and his partners.
One of the great things that I did like about this, and you talk about, it actually is very fitting in Batman Incorporated right now, you've got this idea that Bruce Wayne is recruiting more Batmen around the world to kind of expand his mission beyond Gotham to a worldwide scenario. And I do think very much the Batman in Widening Gyre is a Batman who would do that. Because we see him, that's one of his goals in this, he's looking at this guy, Baphomet. Am I pronouncing it right?
I'm not sure. I think in my head, I've been pronouncing it Baphomet.
Okay. Yeah, and Gyre, I think, I think I've got that right now, finally.
Gyre, yeah.
You can just go with Goat Dude.
Goat Dude.
Man.
I did like his whole explanation as far as to why he was going with that name and how he was relating to Batman in it, because it really was such a brilliant setup. One of the things that, as I was reading the story, one of my takes on it was I kept trying to see if Silver was somehow driving this as a way, she's like, okay, I'm coming back into Bruce's life. He's got this Batman role. Maybe if I put this guy into position, or if there was a part of time where I was thinking maybe she's Baphomet, and taking on this role to maybe connect with him on that level. And then another part of me thought maybe she's on the outside pushing this character in place, so maybe Bruce is willing to give up the role. So when the swerve actually happened, I didn't see it coming, because I thought she was somehow connected to it.
Yeah.
So I loved how it ended, because to me it was, oh, wow. Makes sense to bring in Onomatopoeia, because it's a character that Kevin Smith brought in Green Arrow and during his Green Arrow run, and then on his previous Batman miniseries that he did. It was great to see that character brought in, but I didn't see that was who it was going to be.
Not at all. That was a complete shock and surprise. And it's funny because I was kind of kicking myself later on when I started rereading the series, and you see the little clues, the little hints, who his identity is. I'm like, how did I miss that? Or it was laid out so that it could look like something else. And that was just something I really enjoyed.
Actually, I have a question for you. As a creator, when you get the scripts, do you get an outline for the whole mini-series? Like, did you get an outline for the whole 6 issues as far as, like, this is what's going to happen, this is the end result? Or do you get them on an issue-by-issue basis? Like, did you know where this story was going to go?
No. I pretty much get things on an issue-by-issue basis. Usually, I get the artwork in lumps. I'll get 3 pages or 5 or, whatever. And I'll work on those. And when I got those last pages, I don't know how many I got, at once, but usually I read through a script once and I highlight stuff that's important to me as a colorist. In this case, though, I don't know why. I think because I knew it was the last issue of that arc, and I knew that there was going to be another arc after that, and it seemed pretty obvious that there was going to be a big thing happening. I didn't read the last half or fourth of the script. And I got those last pages in, and I'm flipping through them, and I see that last spread, And I was just as surprised as anyone else as a result of that. I turned and I looked at that and went, oh my God, they really did it.
And such a happy story, too. I'm like, whoa.
Oh, one of the things I noticed, and I don't know if this was done as an intentional clue or where this came from, but in a lot of the scenes where Bruce and Silver are kissing, there's like a heavy red background. Now, when I was first initially reading this, I'm thinking, okay, this is love, passion, all that kind of, and then given how it ends, I'm like, was this more of a warning of foreboding, a forewarning of something tragic's about to happen?
That was just luck. I mean, yes, I guess my thinking was in those scenes, use red as a way to make things really intense, emotional. It's not just love. It's a combination of love and Bruce Wayne / Batman, that he's a really intense person and that he's in the middle of this relationship that he's having a lot of trouble handling. And in the scenes with them, whether they were happy scenes or scenes where they're having a confrontation, I used a lot of red. There's that scene in, I can't remember if it's issue number 5 or number 6, where he basically attacks her.
That was 6.
6, yeah.
Yeah, number 6, and gets that hair sample. And I used a lot of red in there because he's completely freaked out.
And it was great, too, because he just had that moment very soon before that where he took her to the JLA satellite and said, will you marry me?
Well, that whole scene, for me, that's like one of my favorite scenes in Widening Gyre, was just that whole thing as he's slowly building it. Yeah, she's perfect. As if she's made for me. Made for me. And just that look, and that was another one of those panels where you see the initial shock, boom, then kind of shifting, and then it was a really, again, heavy red usage, which I was absolutely loving just because of just his intensity, his anger. I think even one of the scenes, the Batmobile, the windshield was even kind of red tinted over as the car is cutting off Alfred's limo. I thought that was just this whole kind of, like, really pulled me into just that fury. And even when we get into the next page, when he goes through everything, he sees she is human, and he still has those feelings, and she's sitting there trying to explain to him, saying, no, it's okay, and she's comforting him. I love that full-page spread, because it started off very heavy at the top, and then by the bottom, you get the close-ups of their faces. You still had the red background, so it kept everything flow together, but you get that accent of those two together again, and it's, for me, it was kind of like the calming of the situation, not ignoring what had happened and the intensity.
That's good. That's exactly what I was going for there, because on that page, they both calm down, basically, and things get more normal, and so the coloring gradually get more normal.
It was cool, though, because the way you built that was awesome, because you had that pleasant drive with Alfred and Silver, which I really love, because I'm an Alfred junkie. When he's used right, like in these moments where you have him being kind of, he's dad. He's Bruce's dad. He's known this guy since he was a little kid, and he's as excited as can be, being a surrogate parent, to say, hey, it's great to have you in his life, and, you know, look at where things are going. I'm going to be your driver now. You know, he's bringing her into the family and, you know, basically telling her, hey, we're going to have this relationship from now on. This is only going to build over time. It's a very normal, lush green drive. I'm like sitting there, I'm like, wow, this would be so cool to do that. And the reds, when they come in, was right when the Batmobile came in, is exactly when you first see that red. It was a beautiful choice because the intensity that was brought into that moment. And it even went one step further, because Bruce himself, Batman, when he's outside the window and she first says Bruce, is totally red. I loved that choice, because it just, I'm a big fan of, and it's one of the things I'm a testament to you and to colorists like David Barron and Alan Pasolac who've come on the show, really educating us on your work and the approach you take. I love the cinematic work that you guys do as colorists. I'm a big fan. I seek out colorists now. You know, I'm loving work of like Laura Martin, for example, and things. I love like looking around comics and seeing who's doing what color work and what they're doing. And it really is a testament to you guys reaching out to the comic audience and saying, hey, this is what we do, and this is kind of the approach, because it really is educating me. And I actually think I'm a better comic reader now. I've been reading comics for like 30 plus years, but I do think now that my approach to comics is better. I find that I enjoy them even more understanding this work, because this sequence for me, I was like, oh my gosh, this is brilliantly laid out. I wanted to see this animated.
I just noticed at the end of the drive with Alfred and Silver, like right as the Batmobile's driving up and driving in front of them, Jared Fletcher, the letterer, he made the sound effects of the Batmobile's engine red.
Oh, that's cool.
It's convenient.
The sound?
Yeah, vroom. Yeah, that's all red.
So that's all done by the letterer when those sound effects are on there?
Yeah.
That's cool.
That was another one of those lucky happenstances.
Yeah, it works out really well.
Another thing, just on that whole, at the ending there with the kiss scene, again, like the red heavy focus, but in that one final kiss after everything kind of got settled between them, you can still see her ring, and her ring actually had a nice shimmer. So on that on that main red field, you have that white silver sparkle, which I thought was a very nice touch.
Thanks. Yeah, that's... Every once in a while, you need to just keep things really simple and make one thing stand out. That scene, that panel, is a representation of their relationship, their love, and their passion, and the intensity of that scene. And that ring represents that too. So it was a way to make that stand out and still be a part of it at the same time.
It's funny you mentioned keep it simple, and that just... something that really does fascinate me, and it's one of those things that I think separate people like you with actual artistic talent and someone like me who does not have it, is the complexities of the simple stuff, like the snow landscape when they're skiing, or the Arctic Circle as they're approaching the Fortress of Solitude. In my head, I would think, okay, a whitewash, a lot of whites, but when you're doing it, you have a lot of the blues and the grays and the little black accents and offsets, and it just paints this beautiful colored landscape on something in my head I would think would be very plain and boring. Is there like a rule of thought for stuff like that?
I know that when I do scenes that take place in a cold environment, I try to use a lot of cyan because it's a relatively cold color. It's like a light blue, cold light blue, basically. And so, in the Arctic stuff, you'll see a lot of that. You have to decide how you're going to frame things, and ideally each scene has a mood, and you have to think about what colors you've used before and what colors you've used in similar scenes, colors you haven't used, and just try to figure out a way to keep things interesting, both for myself, just to keep things interesting, and for the reader, and to help to tell the story.
The page that Jim's referring to, and I'm looking at it on my iPad right now through the app, that Fortress of Solitude, one of the things I really liked about it was the sense of depth that you created. And do you do that through like different shades of then cyan? Do you like sit there and say, okay, let's use a little bit darker here, let's use a little bit lighter here? I love this feeling of it was vast. And it really looks magnificent. And that's Fortress of Solitude to me. It should be a place that we all go, I would so love to be there. And I do. When I looked at that sequence of events, I'm like, not only is it cool that we see the bat plane flying into there, but you get this sense of the iconic giant key, and then you see all of this. And it had all the right beats, but it had a great sense of depth to me, which the page has a three-dimensional feel, even though it's a flat page. It felt very depth-filled. Is that something you consciously do, or?
Yes. It's I really like to be able to read this now the way that you've read it on your. Do you read it on like a laptop, or do you have an iPad? Or?
I have an iPad.
Okay, cool. Awesome. I want one badly. Yeah, in a scene like this where it's a big establishing shot, especially. I guess there are a lot of things you can do as a colorist to create a sense of depth. You can have different kinds of colors in the foreground as opposed to the midground and the far background. You can fade things which are in the far background, and by fade I mean, if you go outside, the further things are away from you, the less the blacks and the shadows are black or really dark. As things recede, they slowly become more and more the color of the sky. Also, I added a lot of shadows in here. The stalagmites or the crystals in the midground and the foreground, I put shadows on all that based of using the Fortress of Solitude as the light source. And the stuff that's in the extreme foreground, I think I made a little warmer, I think. I'm looking at this now. I'm looking at my hardcover here. But yeah, it's just using different kinds of colors for the foreground, the midground, the background, fading things. In this case also, I added snow falling and the clouds in the sky. I added that stuff too. There's just a lot of different things that you can do, but this is a good example of using, it's still mostly blues, but I've used different shades and kind of washed things out in the far distance, and it's just lots of tricks.
There's a number of shots in this, and it's one of the reasons why I wanted to compliment that. This is one of those where, I think the best compliment I ever give a comic is when I look at a spread or even panels, and I'll say, geez, I'd love that to be a poster. And this was one of those where I was like, wow, I'd love that to be a poster. Because it looks breathtaking, and it's very cool.
Well, send me an email. Maybe I can whip you up something.
Cool. One of the things that I really enjoy about reading this I'm a fan of paper comics, so don't get me wrong on this for any of the listeners. One of the things I like about digital comics and the fact that we have apps now where we have the option to buy a digital version is, I look at this the same way that I looked at when trade paperbacks started coming out. And because when I grew up, there weren't a lot of trade paperbacks. That wasn't a big option. That was something in libraries. There was occasionally a hardcover or something in the library collecting old comics that you could read in the library, but there wasn't like the availability of collected editions of comics that we enjoy today. And I don't look at those ever as being a replacement for the monthly periodicals. I look at them as just a different delivery method to target a different audience. These apps, I think, are a great option for that. It's cool because each of the issues of Widening Gyre not only include the main cover by Bill Sienkiewicz, they also include all of the alternate covers. So I've got the Gene Ha covers as well. And where there's a sketch cover, those were also included on the issues. So that was a really cool option. So as you go through, you'll turn from the first cover, you get the second cover from Gene Ha, and then you get right into the issue. Plus, you can tap on panels, and it'll zoom in.
That's great. I love it. I'm really fascinated by digital comics, and that's a good comparison. The proliferation of digital comics and comparing it to trades is just another way to read it. It gives you another option. Because I don't know if this is true for other readers, but I know that there are some things that I'm happy to read once and not have a copy of, at least like not have a physical copy of. It's kind of like, in a way, a digital comic is kind of like borrowing a comic from a friend, in the sense that you read it once, and if you're in the habit of rereading things, then you'll reread it. But I think the way I read, I think I would, once I get an iPad or something along those lines, then all of a sudden you have three ways of reading comics. You've got the initial single issues, you've got the trades, and then you've got digital comics. And I just think it's great. It gives you another option in terms of your reading habits and your, like, what do you want to have on your shelf and what do you not want to have on your shelves.
It's an interesting thing with the digital. You're able to not only click in on the dialogue and zoom it in, and click on certain panels and zoom them in. Double tap, you can zoom everything back out. But I also love that you can tap, like for Batman Widening Gyre Part 6, The Blood Dim Tide is Loosed. I can double click on that, and it zooms in all the creative team. So you can actually see everybody from writers, pencilers, inkers, yourself, lettering, covers, and editorial team. I like that. I'm a big fan of that because sometimes on the iPad screen, it's not as big as a comic book.
Right.
And you can twist and turn the screen. So like if it's something where, if it's a double page spread, if I turn it sideways, it will then go letterboxed. Mm-hmm. Where that double page spread is letterboxed this way. And I'm looking right now, like I said, that Fortress of Solitude segment, and it just looks great on this screen. Seeing it that way digitally, it works that way. And it's something I'm excited for digital because I feel that there is a fan base who's reading this for the first time through the app. Maybe they don't normally collect paper comics, or maybe they were when they were younger a comic fan, and they'll see the name Kevin Smith and maybe they'll pick this one up and give it a shot, and they're experiencing this for the first time on this delivery. And that's what I really hope with digital, because I think for those of us that are fans, we're used to now, with the advent of trades and hardcovers, reading a comic book delivery in multiple fashions. I do think that this does appeal to current comic fans, but I am hoping that it also appeals to a new audience who maybe would not have read this otherwise, but now are, I'm a fan of Kevin Smith's films. Okay, let me download the app because I've heard he's done some comics. Maybe this is an avenue for them to jump off from this then into other comics.
The fact that you zoom in on the issue's credits proves that you are an ideal comic book reader.
Oh, I love that stuff.
In a lot of cases, I mean, it's maybe hard for people our age to imagine, but there are probably a lot of people who will read a comic book. The first time that they will read a comic book will be on an iPad or on their computer or whatever.
And I think that's great because I think that is, my concern is, and I've said this on the show many times, my biggest problem nowadays is I look at what sales numbers are in comics. The stuff that we are saying are top-selling comics right now. I think the numbers are disgusting because I think the talent in comics nowadays is at an all-time high. I mean, I love this hobby, and one of the reasons why is because I just think the output is stellar. And I want to see more exploration of ways of bringing new readers in versus just targeting the classic fans, because I'm a lock. I'm already sold on the work that all of you are doing. The quality's high, the creators are incredible. I think we're seeing cutting-edge stuff on a month-in, month-out basis in comics, and I think the bar is constantly being raised. And I think that's a testament to the creativity available in this medium nowadays. And I think it's no accident why is Hollywood coming to this medium so much now, because this is where the creativity is. So, I think that's great. So I love seeing this type of thing. I'm looking at this page right now, going more into the Fortress. The alien, or I don't know if alien's not even the genetically produced garden that's in there. This is stunning stuff. It's wacky. It's the best of Superman in a Batman comic.
Yeah.
It's interesting, too. One of the things I've realized about digital comic books is that, from the standpoint of being a colorist, is that when you read a printed comic book, you've got ink on the page. When you look at a digital comic, you're looking at the artwork that has its own light source, which is a very different experience than reading a comic book on a printed page. I'm getting increasingly interested in looking at comic books I've already read, but reading the digital version of them to see what that experience is like. It really is, in some ways, a game changer. And I think what you were talking about quality of artwork and of storytelling in comics right now is true, and I wind up not reading a lot of comic books. Maybe I do read a lot. I don't know. I guess it's all relative. But I find myself increasingly, recently, I'm reading a lot of online previews and that kind of thing, and it's really astounding, the range of styles and the quality of artwork and storytelling that's out there right now. And it's kind of a garage band thing in that it always used to be true, but I think it's increasingly true that really anybody can make a comic book, especially now with digital comics, because you don't have to print it, and printing's expensive. All you have to do is just look at webcomics. They're all over the place, and they're really, all you need is a computer and, some kind of drawing program or something, and you have a webcomic. There's so much good stuff coming out.
And I agree with you. I think it's great for the industry because, to me, comics are one of those mediums where the more attention that's drawn to it, that's why I don't get all caught up in the worrying about replacement, because that used to be the big argument with periodicals, the monthly periodicals versus the trade. Mm-hmm. The single issues, whatever you want to call them, floppies, some people call them, I don't know. I never understood that argument because as a fan, I want this, this hobby's been around since long before my childhood, but for me, it's been around since my childhood. And I want it to be around for years and years and years and years beyond now. And the only way that's going to happen is if there's more attention drawn to it, more avenues for people to get access to it. I'm not a big fan of the replacement. To me, as long as people are willing to buy the monthly paper comics, they're going to be in business still. Trades are still going to be in business as long as people are buying them. Digital will be in business as long as people are interested in buying them. I like the idea that the books are good enough to support multiple different avenues.
That's interesting too. I think it's really exciting. I've been trying really hard to follow news about digital comics because I'm not sure what to make of it. I don't know where it's going or where print's going. Or it's just a really, really interesting and exciting development.
There's one sequence, and I just want to comment on it. It's not in this issue 6. It was earlier on. It's one of my favorite sequences that you guys put together. The Aquaman sequence.
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
You're talking about the part where you talk about unusual humor for a Batman book, but yet it fit for me kind of this stuff that we've all known, but it kind of put a voice to it. That these guys are all friends. The Justice League. I grew up with the Super Friends cartoon, and that was just a great environment for me. And the old Filmation Justice League cartoons and all those type of things. And animation was a lot of my avenue into comics. And you grew up with these guys being friends, but in the comic books, especially with Bruce being so standoffish, you don't really see these great moments where you have the opportunity to see that, they really are friends. And Aquaman is going to be, Arthur, whatever you want to call him, is going to be interested in, okay, I thought you were in trouble, but then I find out from these dolphins that, like, there were screams and stuff like that. And there's this hint at a relationship. He's like, you get this smirk and this bright, like, I wanted to be on the island they were on.
Yeah.
And that's very important when you're doing a Bruce Wayne Silver St. Cloud. These are high rollers. These are high society people. And they're going to go somewhere that's just a little bit cutting edge above where the rest of us can probably afford to be because they're there privately. And I love that moment where they're on this beach where bright, vibrant setting where I clearly wanted to vacation in this spot. And Aquaman shows up. And it turned this into this whole cool little, like, I felt like I was at SeaWorld with the dolphins where I wanted to kind of jump in and start swimming around. And it felt like, and that's something that was really important about the build of this story, because it takes a very dark turn, which I don't think any of it would have mattered if you hadn't had this bright, vibrant, you're ready to high-five Batman. We're with Aquaman at that moment. And I really felt like that in that sequence of events. He's saying the things to him that we all want to say.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, again, it's a book about friendships and relationships, and it's true that those dark points, that those low points, aren't as meaningful if you don't have the bright points, the highlights.
You're talking about just the fun moments when Alfred addresses Bruce as DD, and Silver St. Cloud explains what DD stands for. That had me, just rolling hysterically because just how Alfred's like, but just the look on her face. She had that nice combination of sexy and whimsical, and this is something I've learned through this show, how some of the coolest stuff that I love with facial expressions aren't just on the pencil and ink side. It is very big on the coloring, just with the way you're playing with the different flesh tones and just kind of accentuating what is there. And that's another one of those pictures of just her, just that look on her face, just the way you guys did that scene. I could sit there and stare at that picture for a while just because it was such a great photograph and just that great snapshot in time.
How is it as a colorist to, like, you, because really in this series you've worked with so many iconic characters in there.
I was just going to say, one of the things I really enjoyed about this book was there's all these flashbacks to the Outsiders, the Teen Titans, even just one panel scenes or extended sequences with all kinds of weird old Batman villains, rogues gallery. Weird, I was just looking at, I can't remember the guy's name now with all the colors. What's his name?
I know who you're talking about too. Polka Dotted Man.
Yeah. I really enjoyed working on that sequence because it's an excuse to use really bright colors. But yeah, I just got to work on all these weird, but not weird characters. Some of them really weird, but there's a scene with the Outsiders, Teen Titans, Aquaman. It's just really fun.
Is there any one particular villain and or character coming from the Bat family that you're like, man, I wish I could do more with them?
I was surprised by how much I enjoyed coloring Robin and his different costumes, different incarnations of Robin costume and how that's changed over the years. Because I've always liked that red, green, and yellow combination in comic book. What else? Oh, the Joker is always interesting. I really like the way that Walt Flanagan draws the Joker. He's just really, really creepy, and yet still looks like a real person.
Yeah, they didn't take him too far to the extreme, but you get enough of the psychotic nature of who he is. Mm-hmm. Just to get, you got a firm enough grasp on the crazy, normal blend, the whatnot of the Joker.
It was Crazy Quilt.
It's okay.
Because Polka Dotted Man, it was when they were talking about the Batman villains that hung it up remember, because they talked about the shift of the two eras, and it was in issue 4. They were talking about how we went from the friendlier era to the more violent era. And Crazy Quilt was one of the characters that kept popping up to try to legitimize himself. The reason why I was thinking of Polka Dotted Man was one of the costumes that was hung up, where they showed like the villains that had hung it up in the past.
Okay, yeah, there he is.
And what a bizarre character to bring back, but so fitting for this series because it does go from very serious to very fun, and I like the balance of that in it because it has a nice quirk value, which the Batman Rogues Gallery has a lot of quirks to it.
Definitely.
There's a lot of weird guys out there in the Batman universe. He really has the best rogues gallery of all time.
Well, in issue 5, they had that whole bit with the radio people new to Gotham who decided, hey, it'd be fun to insult the Penguin and Mr. Freeze. And the one ends up in they fish him out of the river, and then the other one's upside down, encased in ice, and we see that's where we see Tim and Baphomet actually taking down Mr. Freeze, and that was just a kind of a really cool sequence because Bruce is off skiing with Silver and enjoying a single night away from Gotham while they're handling this battle. But just that whole reason, as you're reading this story, going, why are these people even thinking of, like, the one compared him to Elmer Fudd, and everyone's like, ah, ha, ha, until they fished out his body. I'm like, well, that's why you don't do that in Gotham.
Yeah, it's interesting. In a way, this story is a glimpse at what it will be like when Batman starts retiring, because you get all these glimpses of him really enjoying, not being Batman, which is, again, pretty unusual in Batman comics. I mean, up until recently, he's for a couple decades now, usually in comics, been depicted as being really intense and hyper-focused. But now, I think the advantage that writers have now is that you can tell, I think, a wider variety of Batman stories in comics. I mean, obviously, there's a lot that you can do with Batman in other media. Just look at the Brave and the Bold cartoon to Dark Knight, the movie. In the comic books themselves, I think that there's a lot more, that there's a wider variety of stories that you can tell now with Batman.
I like the idea of showing that intensity that you were talking about, because I don't think that was ever lost in this. I think what we're seeing here is that there is another side to that, and there is and that makes him more human. That actually, to me, makes him a more accessible character and a more realistic character, because that is going to be something... he is intense. He is driven. And I think we're going to, in Volume 2, see a lot of that intensity from him
Yes.
because circumstances have driven him back to that. But I think it doesn't mean anything if you don't see this side of him and see that does wear on somebody. And when an opportunity presents itself to say, well, maybe there is another life for me, and maybe, because Alfred's been telling him this for years, and he's been so driven that he hasn't allowed himself to see it. So he's opening that door now, and to me, what worked on this is nothing from his past was ignored. Catwoman was, I think, a pivotal character in this. And I was so glad that she was a part of this series, because that, again, added to me, I guess, this sense that everything that's happened to Batman is real and it means something. To the point where she wore her different outfits to try and get him nostalgic about their relationship. And talk about your quirky relationships. Yeah. Their relationship's entirely based on a game of cat and mouse. And I love the 60s Batman television show outfit was brought into this as well. Very, very cool. Like, I talk about iconic presentations. You got the opportunity to color multiple versions of Catwoman, from classic comics to the modern day. And to me, seeing the 60s outfit in this was an even bigger geek out than I thought the classic 70s outfit would be.
That's another thing I really enjoyed about this book was, I think I've got there's multiple versions of a whole bunch of characters, older versions, Silver Age, Bronze Age versions, and modern versions, and I really enjoyed the opportunity to sort of decide, well, what color of blue is the old Batman's cape as opposed to the more modern Batman's blue cape? His costume sort of blue and gray and yellow, and what shades of those colors. Process of discovering and determining that is actually really fun.
Did you have a favorite era that you liked working on?
No. I like being able to switch back and forth. That actually, it keeps things moving. It keeps things interesting. I'm not just using the same colors and the same style of coloring and rendering and the same palette in every single panel. I get to move back and forth and use brighter colors, use darker colors, use crazier colors, use more mundane colors. It's a good way to keep a colorist happy if you're writing a comic book. It's like do lots of different things.
Is there, as a colorist, one of the things that I really appreciate, and I'm noticing it so much more now, is the ability that you have in color work to keep and maintain and accentuate the tone. Because I like in blogs and different sites right now, we get to see like the black and white comparison with the color, and you get to see what the artist's original emotional tone was and how the colorist brings it to life in the colors as well. And it's a great marriage of that. Do you has there been pages that you've done that like you've been frustrated where you're like, it's going for this tone and I'm trying to reach it and I just haven't, then afterwards you're like, finally I got there? Do you have those moments, or is it...
I have those moments, and I also have moments where I get the page done and realize I haven't achieved it, and sometimes you have to redo stuff, and sometimes you just have to move on. But I've had those moments.
Well, I think on the pencil end, the inking end, I think it's probably all of you guys, all whatever level you're working on, scripting end. There comes a point where you've got to say it has to go. Right. We are on a deadline. We have to get it out there, and
Time
it's
to move on.
Yeah, because it's you guys are really on a time crunch. I think with every project you're working on, and it amazes me when you take a look at and I think it's really one of the reasons why I encourage people to look more at the credits, to take a look at how many people touch a comic before it's published, and the different phases and steps that this book goes through to try and make it just right all the way through. You know, whether a book meets its deadline or not, you've got this intense amount of care that's gone into a project. And you guys, no matter how much time you're given, it's probably never enough for you to be 110% satisfied with every single panel that you work on a project.
Earlier, I mentioned that lucky happenstance with that red lettering in that sequence. Yeah, I would love to have more time to coordinate with the writer, even more so the penciler and the inker and the letterer. There have been occasions of where, let's say, I color a panel predominantly green, and then I discover after the comic book has been printed that the sound effect in that panel was also done in green, and so it all gets like washed out, kind of. You know what I mean? And I'm like, oh man, if I had been able to talk to him, I would have, and able to say, okay, I'm going to make this scene green. It's a level of detail and of communication and of involvement that's not always possible, and actually is frequently not possible.
It is, though. It shows, I think, the talent, though, of all of you involved on a project. Just when you look through a book, how rare those circumstances are. Because you're right, those things happen, but it's very rare.
It's a tribute, really, I guess, to the instincts of to all of the parties involved. It's really a miracle that these things usually come out on time and look good and read well. I mean, because there's a lot of stages, and I read once, was reading a blog of another colorist, and they said that there are about 100 things which can go wrong between when you turn in your colors and when the comic book arrives at the comic book store. It's a miracle that it happens at all,
That's kind of interesting. That's kind of neat. One thing I'm just wondering, because again, ignorance on my part on just the work process. Now, if you were to get like a pages or something like that where a character who previously had long hair, later in the book has short hair, or something like just a noticeable physical effect that is off, would you be able to on your end fix stuff or try to minimize stuff, or is it just it's already through pencils and inks, just continue on? What's the mindset on the workflow and all that?
Well, that happens really rarely, which maybe is surprising. I'm surprised a little bit it doesn't happen more often, but it's again, it's a tribute to the instincts and the talent and the hard work of everybody involved that doesn't happen more often. The only time I've really had that happen, I'm trying to think, on a DC book, is when I did that issue of the Search for Ray Palmer, the countdown thing. I colored the Red Rain issue.
Yeah.
And there's a sequence near the end of that book where the artist, the anchor, followed suit, where there were two characters that looked a lot alike and were dressed relatively similarly. And I had to basically remove a domino mask from one character in a couple panels. I can do that kind of thing if I have to. I don't like messing around with pencilers and the inker's line work, but occasionally I'll get a call or an email from an editor saying, if you can do this, it would be great, because if we have to have the penciler and inker do it, it'll take another day, before that gets around and back to me, But yeah, it doesn't happen very often. rarely.
I love that issue too. I'm a big fan of the Vampire Batman. I'm a big fan of Elseworlds in general. So that was super cool. They actually did a Brave and the Bold, the Batman Brave and the Bold cartoon recently, where Batman gets bit by a vampire, and that was it's more Silver Agey. But when he takes on the full vampire form, it's very reminiscent of that Batman. So it was cool to see it animated on television.
Oh, neat. I haven't seen that one yet. I really enjoy watching that show with my son.
It's one of the things I really like about it is it kind of harkens back to the 60s Batman, while yet feeling modern still. It like has that kind of today, which is hard to do. I think to do an accessible Batman that feels today, and yet it did. It works.
It works really well. That show, I think, achieves a lot of things and does a lot of things really well. It blends a lot of different sense abilities. That there's a little bit of the Adam West, the animated intro of the old Adam West show. There's a little bit of that in there. The music at the beginning, the theme music, the animation style, the way that they do special effects. It really does blend a whole bunch of different things, and I think it all really works.
Many of the scripts, this one was written by J.M. DeMatteis.
Oh, okay.
And I think seeing these, I think what's helping with a lot of the animated features, whether it's the DC direct-to-DVD releases or a lot of these shows, is that you'll get script work from time to time right from comic creators and artwork that's inspired by comic artwork. And I think when they look back to the original medium, the source medium, for inspiration for these series or projects, I think that's where it really becomes something special. Yes, this is a unique approach to Batman because it's not quite as dark as you're used to seeing him in the comics, but I think it works because it so clearly is reverent to the history of the character and just the wacky, not only the wacky villains that he fights, but the diversity of the superheroes that I think that you can pull from in the DC universe. This one had the Justice League, what do you call it, the International team.
Yeah.
It had, did you see that episode, the one I'm talking about, Jim?
Yeah, I think so.
Martian Manhunter was on there. It just aired. It was like a couple weeks ago. Martian Manhunter was on there, Fire and Ice, and Booster Gold, and it was the whole team. So it just aired. It was very cool. So if anybody hasn't seen it, I can't DVR it or something and make sure to catch the episode because it was very cool. And this whole it was the talk you had about the Vampire Batman, your issue of the countdown that I remember talking to you back when that project was going on, and that turned out it was cool to see your work on that particular project because I'm such a fan of that universe.
Yeah, I enjoyed working on that too. It's really interesting, isn't it? I don't know exactly why this is, but for some reason, Batman is a really adaptable character. If you think of all the incarnations in like old radio shows and the old black and white serials and cartoons and the Adam West and all the different Batman movies and the different styles of Batman comic books, he's incredibly adaptable. And I don't know exactly why that is.
Well, I think it's because he's really just a person who is disciplined. So in every era and every time, space and place and time, you could have somebody who is just disciplined and who could just who just like decides to rise up against just this everyday man who says I'm not going to take it anymore and fights for good, he becomes one of the good guys. So you can take that that idea and that concept and apply it to anywhere, and that's something that I've enjoyed about his Elseworld stories, in that they've been able to apply that and they've been able to adapt it, but you still kind of get that same feel of this is Batman.
Mm-hmm. It's really interesting. At this point, he's been fleshed out so much, and there have been so many interpretations of the character that there's just so much material to draw from with that character. There really isn't another character in comic books like that.
I think it's a testament to creators too, over the various eras that you've mentioned, whether it's in or out of comics. The fact that they've been able to take those tools and say, how do we make this relevant today? How do we make this work today? Because you figure, look how many stories have been told with Batman, yet they all feel fresh. And I think that's hard to do. How do you take villains that have been around? And not just him, his rogues gallery and his supporting cast. How do you take them and continue to make them relevant? And they've done it. I mean, it's just something where all of you guys are just doing amazing work at taking these characters and continuing to say, well, how can I... And I think that's what the key to it. How do I put my stamp on it? While not losing the core central values of what makes the character work. You talked in this conversation, you talked about a lot how, like, I want to get... the Fortress of Solitude. Look at that discussion we had about that. You're putting your stamp on it, yet you never lose at any point in time. It's the Fortress of Solitude. And the Batmobiles and the different outfits of Batman. You drew a lot of different Batman in this, and yet you're putting your own stamp while at the same time not losing, hey, this was this era, and how should it look from this era? But you're putting your own stamp on that because it's your interpretation of how he should look in that era, and I think that's how it stays relevant.
It's interesting that, as well known as Superman is, he hasn't proven to be as adaptable a character as Batman. And I think you're right, Jim. It might have something to do with the fact that he's a guy that doesn't have any powers, and he's, as a result, maybe more identifiable. And also, if you're making a movie with, real actors, you don't need as many special effects. He's just a guy with a costume.
In the end, we all think we could maybe be Batman. If I trained, I could actually do that stuff. And in reality, we couldn't do that. This is a lifetime of discipline. But it's in our heads, and our whether it's our ego or whatnot, we do think we could do this. Just give me a couple weeks to get in shape, I can pull this off. And I think it's, for me, that's always the fun part of Batman, of these stories of these type of heroes, where while I am a very strong Superman guy, just because I really do like seeing the character that does stuff beyond those of mortal men, there is this with the Batman, there is this connection with this type of character, this type of persona that just it always does bring me in. And this kind of story that really personalized him, humanized him, that we got was just a wonderful treat.
Thanks. Yeah, he's, in a way, I think that maybe Batman is kind of a perfect storm kind of a character, in that he's a guy that doesn't have powers. He has this great rogues gallery, which again is an accumulation of lots of writers and artists over years and years. And he has this, this really great origin story, a tragic origin story. I really enjoyed the opportunity to work on a Batman book, and a Batman book that has tons of other characters. It really keeps things interesting for me as a colorist.
The closing of this issue I really want to talk about, because we have this cool Arkham sequence where Baphomet walks past the Joker's cell, and the Joker looks at him, and in that moment I'm like, he knows. Yeah. He knew that was onomatopoeia. How does a Joker know anything that he knows? But in that lunatic, and that's one of the things that I love about the Joker too. He sometimes seems like he's got no rhyme or reason, but then there's a wicked intelligence side to this guy that, like, ugh. And when writers and artists nail it in those moments, I think it adds to the creep factor of the Joker. When it's not that he's not a dunce, he actually is, in his own way, a brilliant lunatic. And that sequence where he knew, he caught it before Batman did.
Yeah. Batman is blinded by love right now.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and also, this is his out, this Baphomet. And he so wants to believe that this guy is, the one that he can rely on, to the point where he had Tim, kind of evaluating him, and I loved that. I loved Robin evaluating him in those moments, because that added to the story to me. I'm like, it isn't just Bruce, he's looking for an objective person, and Tim gave him a really cool, honest evaluation where, talked about his failings, but talked about his strengths, and how this guy could be, and the whole storyline with that, I just kept building, and I think that added to the sense for me that even with seeing that moment with Baphomet and the Joker, when I first read it the first time through, I took it as, like, he was trying to intimidate the guy that put him there.
Yeah.
But then when you read it again, and it's another great example of why it's important to reread your comics, that scene is so totally different to me now, because I knew that, Silver's throat gets slit by this guy. And I'm like, he knew. I didn't see it the first time through, but he so knew.
Yeah. It's a nice bit of storytelling.
One other couple of references I just want to, before we wrap up this, talking about this issue, that I really like to talk about from classic Batman. I love that we got to see the 89 film Batmobile in this, but also the atomic in the background, whatever that atomic generator was that was in the 60s Batman show that they used to always climb up and have fights on when there was a Batcave battle. I liked that this series wasn't just it first of all honored all of comics and obviously Englehart Rogers era Batman, but it pulled from all over the place and made it all work. And I think that's really important. It's what I liked about books like All-Star Superman. And it's what I really liked about this. It kept the Batman tone all the way through. It embraced everything. And I found at the end, I'm like, I don't really care where this takes place in continuity. And I don't mean that as a bad thing. I'm looking at this as a definitive Batman story for this creative team. And it's something that stands out for me. And I think it's important to do in a mini, where I think it's totally accessible to just about anybody. I found that I could place it in continuity because of, how Tim's dressed in this, and, Dick Grayson, obviously, is Nightwing during this era, and they place it very nicely where, when we're done, you guys did a great job of making me feel like, okay, it occurred just about here. But I felt that it wasn't necessary for me to do that. I just enjoyed it as a complete story, even though we're not done yet. But I felt like this first 6 issues, it had a definite ending. There's a cliffhanger there, but the story, the Baphomet story, is done. Now it's the revenge on Baphomet.
One of the things that got me that I was surprised by, but I actually really enjoyed, so I'm glad you guys did it, where you actually show her throat getting slit. You see the blood splatter. You guys, went, pretty good detail, into it. And I thought that was just kind of a cool moment. It's sad for her, but it was just, the fact that you didn't shy away from it. You didn't make it overall one solid tint. This was a very colorful, open scene. When you guys were creating this, was this one of those things like, is this going to get through? Are they going to say too gory? Or did this thing just fly right through, no problems?
I can't remember if there were any notes about... Occasionally I will get notes about make the blood red or don't make the blood red, that kind of thing. But I don't think there was anything along those lines with this. There might have been, because I did make it a bright red. But I kind of hemmed and hawed about this, about how to do it. I could have done it much more simply, use some flat colors to make things, dramatic in that way. Like the previous panel where you get that reaction shot from Bruce on the previous page.
You got the ka-clack, which was showing... it was the first time we got to realize it was onomatopoeia, because his whole MO is he mimics the sounds around him. So the ka-clack that was happening on Bruce's belt, he mimicked there. And I didn't catch it. That's another thing I didn't catch the first time. But I loved Jim, you mentioned earlier the framing in red. That sequence with Bruce that you're talking about, the first red that we see Bruce's shock. We don't know what happened until we see the next panel.
Yeah, I had to figure out how to make those last 3 panels or so, and that last spread stand out. I had to try to figure out how to work the rhythm of that sequence and of that page turn. It just seemed like the best way of doing it, rather than doing that last 2-page spread all in red or something like that. To have Bruce's reaction be in red and then have the scene, that shot on the 2-page spread be essentially really realistic. Use essentially realistic colors. I don't know, I guess as a way of making it real, making it rooted or grounded, and then make that blood really red, and I put little highlights on each little drop of blood to sort of add a 3-dimensionality to it.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, and I liked how as her throat's being slit and her one hand's out, you can still see the glimmer on the ring. It still had that little ding kind of shimmer on it as it's catching the light, as it's a horrific, scene happening to her, but you still have that. And I thought, I don't know, just looking through that whole sequence, I was like, man, this looks cool.
I just noticed this. On top of all that, Silver's eyes are looking at us, basically.
Yeah, we're the camera, basically,
mm-hmm.
which I really liked. You had to do a lot of storytelling there, all of you guys. because in those few panels, you want to reveal a little bit about Onomatopoeia for people who don't know who he is. Because if this was their first series, for example, this is the real point where you're establishing this character's MO. Yet you don't want to reveal it any sooner because you ruin the whole point of, the hiding it from the get-go. And I really liked how that was established, with the slit and the way that all worked out. It was a perfect marriage of art and the dialogue to really tell just a great deal of story in a very limited amount of time, which I thought played out very well. Again, cinematic.
Well, thanks. It was definitely a sequence that I put a lot of thought into. The panel where we see Bruce's back and the Batmobile and the penny, and you have the word balloon from off screen. I was debating back and forth what to do with that panel. Do I make it like really cold, like a blue? Do I make it red? And I went back and forth with like a couple options. And
I like the way you handled it because to me it was this sense of we didn't know what was going on yet, and there was a slow build to that because it's more muted than the previous panel above it, which I really liked. Because the panel with his belt's very colorful. It's normal, I guess I'd say. You don't have any sense that anything's going on, but it's the first time that he repeats a sound effect. I loved how there was that. It was a little bit more muted than the next panel, where the intensity, because the next panel needed to be more intense because that was Bruce becoming aware of what was happening, because that was the moment where he turned around and realized what he was dealing with, and I thought that was the perfect way to handle that, because it was a build. It was a gradual build between three panels. It was like 1, 2, 3, bam.
It's that moment of just abject, horrifying realization. He has that one moment where he realizes what's going on and that it's probably too late.
And this is it's funny. I thought about this series so much afterwards, which is another testament to the series, because if it's a book you talked about earlier, with comics, there's comics that you reread over and over again. Then there's comics you're kind of like, I really enjoyed the experience of reading that, but I don't necessarily need to revisit it. It served its purpose, great entertainment, and films are like that too. There's certain films where I'm glad I paid and went to see the film. I'm done with it though. It was great. I would recommend the experience to somebody, but I don't necessarily need to revisit that experience. So comics have, I think, a great comparison to film a lot of times in how you can enjoy them in a variety of different manners. But this is one, I think, because of the nature of the cliffhanger, I'm wondering, is there any possible way Silver could still be alive? And what would that mean if she was? And if she's dead, what will that do to Bruce? And in both cases, no matter what happens to Silver, this is devastating for Bruce. Because he was planning his whole life around her. So alive or dead, which I think she's dead, but I mean, alive or dead, there's an interesting story to be followed up with on this, with what happens to Bruce from here on out. Because the life that we saw him planning for 6 issues so carefully, because this really was him planning to jump off, being Batman, maybe part-time. I could see him still helping out, or being, kind of like what we've seen in cartoons like Batman Beyond, where he's maybe behind the scenes as a mentor figure or something like that. Maybe he would take on that role. All kinds of options as far as where he could have gone if this had gone nicely.
Yeah.
But I love that this series has left me in a place where I've had to think about, where is this going to go from here? What is it, and what is it going to mean for Bruce? Because Bruce knows about Onomatopoeia's family.
Oh, does he? Okay.
Because remember in the one issue,
issue 5,
where he followed him,
That's
and
right,
the family doesn't know. I'm guessing that was his family.
Well, or was it? I don't know.
I don't know. I mean, I guess that's a great example of a question I have. He followed him. Was it really his house, or was this something Baphomet set up? Because you know what, with how carefully Baphomet orchestrated all this, because we never really saw him with the family, did we?
Mm-hmm. Not in this series. In the first series, they showed the ending of it with him. He had some normal suburb life,
right?
And they just show him hanging up his mask, and just the ending of the issue where he basically got away because Batman chose to save the Joker instead of going after him.
Right.
So we saw that kind of stuff, but it wasn't enough really to say that this is the same family as that one.
Mm-hmm. Good point. Interesting. I can say, having started coloring the first issue of the second arc, I'm not sure if it's going to be called issue 1 of volume 2 or issue number 7, but without giving anything away, the way it starts out is probably not what you would expect. It's almost mundane. It's actually, I think it's really interesting. I think it's a good approach.
I'm wondering if it'll start off, like you said, being known as Volume 2, or if it'll have a different title, or how it's going to go, because this is listed as 6 of 6
Okay.
on, at least on the app. I don't remember if it was originally listed that way.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think it was.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it was. I'm not sure.
I'm pretty sure it was.
So I'll be curious to see what it's titled, if it's listed as Volume 2. I don't know why they would change the numbering on the app, so it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. So
Yeah, the initial listing on the cover says 6 of 6.
okay.
So, yeah.
So I'll be curious to see how it's titled, or how it's labeled too when it's on there. That's very cool. Art, you know what? I want to make sure, before we wrap up this portion of the show, to talk about some of your upcoming work. You're working on a project actually that I've been following for quite some time for Archie. You're going to be working on a book called Sam Hill. Is that a mini-series, I'm guessing?
Yeah, I think it's a 4-issue miniseries. I'm done with the first 2 issues. I get the impression that they're just building up they'll probably solicit it once the whole thing's done. I think that's... I kind of get the impression that that's how Archie works. And so it probably won't be solicited until July, probably. I'm really, really enjoying working on that book. Greg Scott does the pencils and the inks, and it's written by Tom DeFalco, I think.
Nice.
Yeah. And it's just really enjoyable. Greg Scott's artwork. I colored a backup story, was it, or was it a full issue? I can't remember, of Inferno. It was one of the Red Circle comic books that Straczynski wrote.
Yeah.
At the one shot, and I guess Greg was really happy with my coloring on that. And actually, right when I started working on the Shield, I had the choice of working on the Shield or working with Greg Scott again on Inferno. I guess it was that he was drawing for a while. I think he was doing a backup of Inferno, and I chose to work on the Shield just because it was a higher page count and so more money, and also it was different, and it was a chance to work with new people. And I'm really glad I chose, because I love working on the Shield, but I'm really enjoying working with Greg Scott again. His art style, I just find it really, really easy to color, and it's just breezy. I really love it.
Now, besides the Sam Hill, actually, before we jump on from that, who is Sam Hill for our readers who maybe aren't familiar with him? Because he's a classic character that they're bringing back. It's a private detective.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he is a character that Archie has had. I guess it would have been the 50s or the 60s. I could look this up, but yeah, he's a character that Archie has published in the past, and yeah, he's a private detective in New York. He's got a secretary, and it's pretty much what you would expect. Although he doesn't drink and he doesn't smoke. He's this really, well, not straight-laced guy, but he's this sort of rock solid character. I'm not sure how to describe it. It has actually affected the way that I color the comic book and him, is that he's this really cool character who occasionally loses it. Well, and now I really want to look up and see how old the original comic is.
Well, because it is an Archie property that one of the things I like about it is it's not something you'd expect out of Archie. And I'm like, well, it's bringing back a cool classic character that they haven't used in years, and I think it's something that comics can use right now. I'd love to read a good private detective story, and this sounds like it's right up my alley. I actually like the idea that they're waiting to solicit, if that's what they're going for, until the whole project's complete, because I think that's really important when you're launching a new property. To have something come out, you can have it come out in a nice, timely fashion. People can count on it. Hopefully, if you get enough readership to it, they will continue doing more Sam Hill.
I would love that. Like I said, I really enjoy working with Greg Scott, and the stories are really fun, really basic private detective stuff. They're mostly single issue stories, but there is an overall arc in the 4 issues. At least that's my understanding based on the first 2 issues. It looks like Sam Hill originally was published in 1949 and 1950 by Archie Comics. He had his own series that lasted 7 issues, looks like.
They have an app, too. I'm hoping that they reprint. Maybe they already have. I'll have to check.
Well, that would be neat. That would be smart of them, yeah.
Because, you're talking about 2 years, so, it's not a ton of material to collect, but it'd be kind of cool to see the classic with the modern interpretation of it as well. I'd love to. I'm into that kind of stuff. I like seeing the classic comics and then seeing them done modernized. So I hope maybe they'll do that. The other project you're working on right now is one we can't really talk about at all, other than we can announce that you're working on it, is Flashpoint Project Superman, where you're teamed up again with Gene Ha.
Yes, I just got earlier today, I got the first 8 pages penciled and inked by Gene, and I'm really looking forward to working on this. I've got sort of an image in my head of a coloring style, a different approach to coloring, just as a way to experiment, a way to do something different, a way to sort of expedite the coloring process, because the schedule on this book is a little tight. And also because I'm working on Gene's artwork, and Gene, of course, is great. It gives me an opportunity, when you work with a really good initial artist, it kind of frees you up as a colorist. You can kind of mess around more in a way, because their work is so good you can't screw it up, really. I mean, you could if you were, just really ridiculous. But it brings out of respect for the original artwork, it brings out your best as a colorist, and also it frees you up to sort of experiment and do really interesting things. And I'm just really looking forward to it.
Is it helpful to work with an artist that you've worked with a number of times before, as far as knowing your own approach?
Mm-hmm. Yes, yeah. One that you have, in this case, a friendship with. I've known Gene since the mid-'80s, I think, which, boy, seems a really long time ago now. And so, I talk to him on the phone pretty regularly, even if we're not working on something. And, I know that I can count on Gene for high quality artwork, and so as a result, I'm always looking forward to it. And actually, here's an interesting sidebar, maybe, is initially we were going to draw and color Project Superman in a style that we developed, but then the scheduling on the miniseries changed, and Gene realized that he didn't have enough time to render things in that style. So I actually did a couple of sample pieces from Gene and for Eddie Berganza, who's the editor on the book. We're not going to use that style, and actually I think Gene is looking around now to find a different project that we can do in that style. So, as a result of that experiment, something else hopefully eventually will come of that, and it will probably be at DC. So
I hope they include those sample pages in the collected edition. I think it's always cool to see, like, hey, this is an initial test run. It's one of the things I like about hardcovers after the fact with a series, is like bonus pieces and things like that. Hey, this is what we were experimenting with, this is what we're going to do, sketch pieces. I'm always interested in the behind-the-scenes stuff, because to me, I think collected editions add to my respect of creators, because you get to see just how much, even before you've even started on the actual product that we're going to see, how much work goes into just like saying, hey, here's some test runs of what we did, which that stuff takes a lot of time to put together, much less just doing the regular project. And
it does.
I'm fascinated by that.
Oh yeah, it's true. I don't usually have to do that kind of thing, but because Gene had this idea in his head of a style that he wanted to use, and we both needed to know what it would look like. So we whipped up a couple samples, and it looked, I have to say, it looked really good. It looks really neat, but there's just not enough time on this project. So hopefully we'll be able to get something else going that we can use it on, something with a little bit more loose of a schedule, not unlike what is happening with Sam Hill, in that maybe we can do the whole thing before it gets solicited or something.
It was funny with the all the speculation and rumors and opinions going on about Flashpoint. Are you guys who are actually on the creative team who actually know what's going on? Are you out there reading these stuff going, you're way off?
I'm a colorist. You have to realize I am the last guy in the process. There's a writer, there's an editor, there's a writer, and then a penciler, and then an inker, and then a letterer, and then there's me. I hear about things last. I don't think I really know anything that you guys don't know, although I've read the script for number one. I'm not going to talk about it, but I guess I can say that first issue of Project Superman, it covers a number of different time periods. I think that's all I'll say.
No, and that's a good idea. But I guess one of the things I like about your comment, though, it makes it I would assume makes it a fun job, because when you get new pages of a project, especially if you're enjoying the project you're working on, it's almost like you get to be to a certain extent like the readers, in the sense that you're gradually finding out what's going on as the story. Well, we actually touched on this with Widening Gyre. You didn't know the ending until you got to see the ending,
right?
So, I mean, that's got to be an enjoyable part of doing your work as well. As you're building to a crescendo of the story, you're really going along with that ride with the readers.
Yeah. I mean, I kind of prefer it that way. I mean, I've been involved at the early process too, where you're coming up with the ideas and then like working on a proposal or a pitch or sort of helping out with the plot. I've worked on that end too, and that's of course really fun and really enjoyable and really rewarding. But I also like I get a script, like the same day I get on my first pages, or maybe before, or maybe after. To some degree, I'm along for the ride like everyone else is.
I want to make sure people know, I know we're going to talk about Smallville, but I want to make sure, this seems like a perfect time to do it. Your website, artlyonart.com?
Yes, artlyonart.com, although I have become increasingly unhappy with my website. At some point this year, I want to redesign it and maybe find a new host. But yes, artlyonart.com.
Cool. Yeah, and that's honestly, that's where I found out about Sam Hill. I tend to check it out regularly just to see, hey, what's Art working on now? I mentioned it in the start of our recording. I follow, before when I read comics, I got to know who writers were. I followed writers. I got to know who pencilers were. I followed pencilers. I'm following colorists now too. As far as where I'm enjoying their tone and take on there, which is something that's very new to me. I'm starting to develop favorite colorists and favorite color work, because I'm noticing what you guys are doing with experimentation, where I'm not saying that it has to always be like from this project is wacky different. It's more so of the personalization of the style and tone and approach to the project. And I'm glad to see more of the color work getting noticed in interviews, where you'll see the creative team mention the colorist in the interview, saying, and I was thinking about this when I was sending over pages to, such and such colors and all that. I'm noticing that's happening a lot more regularly, where that's being mentioned. And I think it's just really great, because it's adding to the whole concept for me of the creative layers that go into creating a comic, and just how much work that you guys all do. So I just think it's really cool, and I applaud you for maintaining your website, because it's something that, as a fan myself of comic work, I am bookmarking more and more pages of various creators that I'm enjoying, and I do check, I find myself, okay, what's this person doing now? That's how I knew about Sam Hill, and I'm excited for Sam Hill because of that.
I think traditionally comic book colorists have been kind of underappreciated, which I'm not sure. It's weird when you think about it. I mean, it's a medium that really relies on color a lot, and traditionally readers, don't notice it or don't really think about it. They think about the writer and the penciler, which to some degree, makes sense, because those are people who are coming up with the ideas in a way. Although I guess as a colorist, I'm coming up with a different set of ideas. I guess a different approach. But I'm glad that you guys talk about colorists. I'm glad that the colorists are becoming more appreciated, and not because I'm a colorist. I mean, I love comic books. I've loved comic books since I was a wee lad, and the more that people appreciate the process and what goes into it, and how each of those jobs is done by, in most cases, by a different person, and it's a complicated process, and it's just a wonderful medium, and it's just a weird business.
Well, I think that's some of the positives of the internet. Because a lot of times, we always look at the internet, the negative things about the internet, how it's, there's a lot of bashing of this and that and the other thing going on the internet. But I think one of the positives of the internet is an educational tool. We have access to things. I remember growing up, what was comics to me when I was growing up? Well, I was drawn to characters a lot. That was my first avenue into comics. I wasn't really aware of any creators on comics when I first started reading. It was more so I was drawn in, okay, I'm a Batman fan, I'm a Spider-Man fan, and like I said, animation and drew me in, so I followed characters at first. Then as I got older and I started paying more attention to those credits on the page, you started following more creators. And I think it's been an evolution over time. And I think the internet has helped in the sense to make us aware of the comic book process because of interviews. I think that's something that there's a lot more interviews out now. Before you had to rely on a magazine or a fanzine being published to have any awareness of creators at any level on comic books, from editors straight on up through everybody else. Nowadays, I think we have a lot more access through short interviews, through websites, through blogs, through web pages. And I think it has made a lot more positive awareness of just how much all of you do in the course of a month. It's a miracle comics come out monthly.
It really is. If there's one job in the world I don't want, I don't want to be a comic book editor. Because those guys have a really tough job. Because they have to organize all that, and all of those people involved in the creation of that comic book, they have to organize that. Actually, somebody who's a group of people who are really underappreciated, and understandably so, because it's not the kind of thing you read in the credits of a comic book, but that is the production department at each publisher, and those are the people who take all of the files and stick it all together and make sure that everything is in order, all the files are in order and where they need to be, and that everything gets printed properly.
Wow.
Those people are really important.
And you're right. That's a part of the process. Even just now that you mentioned, I'm like, wow, it's a part of the process I don't really think about. But you're 100% correct. And they probably we know they all operate on a very tight deadline schedule.
You were saying earlier about the internet, and one of the great things about the internet that wasn't available when we were young and reading comic books is, if you pick up a comic book, regardless of why. If you decide that you like a writer or a penciler or an inker or a colorist, you can go online and they probably have a website or a blog where they might have unpublished samples of their artwork or previews of something that they're working on, or some sketches that they've done at conventions. It's really great. Anybody you meet at a convention, I do this all the time. Every time I go to a convention, one of the first things I do when I get back home is I get out all the business cards or freebies or whatever that I picked up at the convention, and I go online and I look up all of those websites, regardless of whether it's a writer, penciler, inker, a colorist, or whatever. If it's somebody whose stuff I'm really interested in, you bookmark that, and I go back occasionally. And I've actually made some friends that way by you meet them at a convention, you talk a few minutes or whatever. You can go home, and I look up their stuff, and I think, I'm going to send this guy an email because I was really interested in this, and I had a question about that, and we didn't have time at the convention. And I think that people shouldn't be afraid of doing that. Usually, on an artist's website, there's a way that you can send them an email. And I think that people should do that if they have questions or if they're interested or.
Well, it actually shows them, too, that having the business cards, having the freebie or whatever was at the table, it was working, which is good feedback as well, because those things cost money. So the fact that they have them there, it lets them know that, hey, I'm getting some traffic because of this, or people are, noticing because of this, and it actually was worthwhile for me to put that investment in to draw people to that site. So that's very cool. Plus, it's also probably, to them, a lot of times, especially by Sunday at a con, you're worn out. And to have people talk about something with you after the fact when they've had a chance to regroup is probably preferable as well.
Yeah, and you might be able to get a lot more time with them, through an email than you would at the convention, especially if they're, a popular artist. I know a lot of times artists at conventions will do a certain number of sketches at the convention, and that's based, just on how much time they think that they're going to have to be able to spend drawing, in those 3 days or 2 days. But they will also have a list of drawings that they'll do after the convention when they get home, because they have a little more breathing room then.
Nice work, Adam. What are these characters up to?
Jim, I received a Facebook message a while back from one of our listeners about a book, and we sent it. It's a book that you haven't read that I have, so it's very cool. Do you want to give a little shout out?
I just want to give a big thank you to Robert and Rebecca Jenkins It's Superman novel by Tom DeHaven.
Yeah, and I know you haven't read that one. And Robert made mention on Facebook when he sent me a message. He said, "Hey, if you guys read this one," and I had, and I knew you hadn't, and I know you're with your love for Superman, you had to have read that book. So thanks, Robert, very much for sending.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you. I'm sitting there, and when I got here, Sean handed me. I'm like, "Oh, what's this?" And I'm looking. I'm like, "Cool."
And that's one of the ones. It takes place in the Golden Age era. It takes place before the initial Action Comics storyline with Superman, so it shows a different take on his early years, something that's never really been explored, because those stories were told much later in Superman's life. Where it was a different Superman. More in your Silver Age era and Modern Age that we've got those kind of stories.
And it's been a while since I read a book that didn't have pictures in it.
You're pretty much a novel reader, though. Yeah.
Yes.
But it is hard to find the time.
Hi, this is Sam Saunders from Raleigh, North Carolina. I heard on your previous episode you were talking about Supergirl in the JLA comic. I'm just curious, you were talking about her power set, how she's slightly more powerful than Superman. And I remember when she first came about again in Batman Superman, they talked about her physically being more mature in her powers than Superman was at that age. But I never really actually knew that she was higher than him in the power range. So what I'm wanting to know is when exactly did they discuss that for sure, that she was stronger than Superman? Well, that's it. Thank you.
That was actually discussed in Superman Batman during that original arc. She was physically stronger than him at that age, but then he also alluded to the fact that she was stronger than him. And he had to use his experience with having the powers to overcome her when she turned into that dark side version of herself. So that was something they alluded to in that arc, but they've mentioned it since. It's not something they make a big deal about, though. It only seems to come up during rare times where there would be an opportunity for a reason for them to be compared.
And I think she's made some passing comments in her comic, but never anything, big and bold and, whatnot. So, but it kind of makes sense if at that age, if at the same age, she is higher on the level. As she gets older, as she spends more time underneath her son, when, she's going to get stronger, just because if you start off at a higher level, then they have the same growth level that he had, boom, it should in...
I don't think it's an insane amount higher than his, though. I mean, I think it's, we're still dealing with the same basic superpower sets, but there was an implication that she was stronger than him physically, and that would mean all the powers work a little bit better.
And girls do develop, mature faster than boys, so that could also partially be part of it. There could be something with the female Kryptonian DNA that they absorb energy better or more efficiently or something in that line.
I think they left it in as a potential story element if people wanted to use it, but I don't think it's something that anybody's really made a big deal about, because I don't know, how much more powerful than him do you really need her to be? You don't. I mean, realistically. It's just kind of an interesting little story element that I think they used at the time, I think to make her more formidable in that Superman-Batman arc.
Yeah, probably.
To make it so, why would Superman have a hard time taking her down? Because she's stronger. And his experience was what he needed in order to use in order for that part.
Now, here's the thing. Power Girl, she is not more powerful than Superman, correct?
I don't know if they've ever established that. I think, again, similar power set. Do you take her as weaker than him?
I don't think it's weaker, but I thought there have been comparisons, and he is stronger. Mm-hmm. But then again, I'm not 100% certain if that's current continuity or if that's just an old story when they first introduced her that I'm remembering. I'm remembering bits and pieces where there was a comparison between the two, and I don't even remember where I read that comparison.
Well, looking at it logically, let's look at it a different way. You deal with 3 humans who are all runners. They all train the same. Okay, so some of them are going to be genetically just better runners because that's just the way that they're built. Even if they're doing the same training, there's going to be one that's going to stand out. There's going to be one that's in the middle, and there's going to be one that's going to be on the low end of those 3. And I'm talking about people that do the same intense training to be runners. So I mean, it would make sense in the Superman family that if you look at 3 of them, they're all impressive, superpowered heroes, but one of them is going to clearly just be genetically stronger.
Yeah, a little bit better.
My understanding is that it's Supergirl. My understanding.
Yeah, I think
they don't play it into the story much, though, and I don't know that there's a reason to. Other than that it was interesting. I think it really was. Why did they do it at that time? It was interesting to do that, making her a bad guy when, they turned her dark for her being Darkseid's minion or whatever, to have her be a little stronger than Superman. Plus, it served the purpose to say, well, she hasn't had the powers as long. How is she able to really hold her own against him? Well, because she's stronger. And I think that's really why they did it. And I don't know that there really is a story reason to make too big of a deal out of it right now.
Now, let me throw a question out to you.
Mm-hmm.
You're in a dire situation. Only a Kryptonian can help you.
Uh-huh.
Which of the three do you pick?
Superman.
Why?
Because of this experience. I would go on experience alone. Second, I would call Power Girl, same reason. And third, I would call Supergirl. And honestly, if you go on experience alone, technically, if you look at current continuity, Power Girl and Supergirl are almost a wash. As far as experience, I mean, Power Girl and Superman, are almost a wash as far as experience. I think Clark's technically got a little more experience than her, so I guess I'd go with Clark, especially in the big, universe-shattering situations. If I need a Kryptonian, only Kryptonian's going to come in, I'm going experience versus power.
Okay, cool.
Because I think in a situation like that, I always would go for, in the military, are you going to go for the strongest general or the most mentally gifted strategic general? You're going to go for the general that has the most experience with strategy, the one that, you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah,
and I guess I look at it the same way, but I guess how would you answer that? Who would you go with first?
Oh, I would have gone with Power Girl.
Why Power Girl?
Well, just because, I would have said after, because one, she's going to get the job done because she is Power Girl and she is cool. Then after everything was said and done, I'd say, I could have picked any Kryptonian, but I went with you because I knew you had my back and you'd help me out, and that would maybe get some digits.
Okay.
See, that's where I'm thinking.
See, I'm married. I'm not thinking that way, but that's a good reason. And I got to be honest with you. Even if I were to argue with you afterwards, I wouldn't say, "Dude, are you crazy? She doesn't have the experience Superman does." No, I think it's pretty much so wash. That's a smart move. Because you're actually, you're looking beyond just the event. So I don't have any argument for you on that one, other than I can't do that if I want to stay married.
Right. Once again, different positions in life. We can look at things differently.
I don't know. Are you with me as far as the power set goes? I don't know.
All serious, definitely. To answer the question seriously, what you said with Superman, just because of just that experience, and I think. It is a tough call because those two, when you look at Superman and Power Girl, they have the same type of experience. They have the same type of life experience and whatnot. But for some reason, I would trust Superman as having a little bit more on just all the wider variety of dealings.
He's got a smidge.
He's got a smidge more.
Well, no, because honestly, agreeing with you to a certain extent, saying that it is a tough issue, Power Girl in recent years with leading the Justice Society of America, her experience levels and her appearances in Birds of Prey even before that and things like that, my respect level for her has just risen. And the way she dealt with things like Infinite Crisis and stuff like that, the maturity I think of that character now, especially when we see it more in her solo series, is I don't know that I would feel like I'm going wrong with either of those two.
And actually any of the three, because the Supergirl stuff,
now.
And what we're seeing in her in the Justice League, I'm kind of digging, and then just her solo series, where we're really seeing the birth of a very strong hero. But she still needs more time in the field. She still needs more experience.
You're not going to go, "Oh, Supergirl showed up." No, you're not. Gonna, you're right. You're not going to feel bad about it either way. No, I guess what I was asking about. Do you think I'm right as far as power levels? Do you?
Yeah,
it's pretty established that she's.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it is.
That run was the one that for me has established it. It's been mentioned in passing since then. I can't reference specific issues though. I just know I've read it that way.
I thought there was someone made a comment to her, and she made just like a little offhand silent comment like, "No, I'm faster. No, I'm stronger." It was someone referred, basically, I think somebody made the comment like, "Oh, we got Supergirl, not Superman," and it was just an off comment from what I'm remembering, but I don't remember what issue or even where I saw that, but I could have swore I saw there was just a little comment made by her where she claims to be faster.
The original Superman-Batman arc and her initial kickoff of her
I know
series
it's definitely
is
there.
definitely where that was established.
Yeah.
Because he's asking where it was established, and that's where. It's been referenced in passing since then, but nothing strong. I mean, I can't sit there and say, there's this whole arc where they really referenced it heavily and fleshed it out. So no, I don't have that kind of an arc to tell you about. It's just something that's been mentioned in passing. I don't think that writers have had a lot of use for it. Because really, once you've got a Kryptonian power set, you don't really need to go beyond that, I think, other than in passing. I think it was cool for that particular story. It's a good question. Jim, we got a cool email here from John Mayo, and I wanted to share it with our listeners. John Mayo is the co-host of the Comic Book Page podcast. Shawnee DC and Sensei of the Whatnot. As you know, I'm a big DC fan, and I also track comic book sales. With the huge wave of Flashpoint comics coming out, I thought I'd try to figure out how the various titles might rank relative to each when they come out. In other words, what order I thought they would appear on the top 300 comics list without getting too hung up on how well they would do in terms of number of units. I figured this is the sort of exercise retailers might be doing for how the titles would sell at their store. Turned out to be much more difficult than I expected. A number of the properties don't really have a comparison title that I could think of, like God of War and Canterbury Cricket, for example. While other had creators that I didn't recognize, such as Sean Ryan and Pornsak Picshotti, who is an editor. And I apologize, I know I butchered that name. Anyways, I figure you guys, or your listeners, might find it fun to try the rankings how the various titles will do relative to each other on the sales charts. Personally, I'm planning on buying all of these titles. I'm a bit of a pushover when it comes to DC. Congratulations on your 5-year podcast anniversary. Keep up the great work. John Mayo of the Comic Book Page podcast. And thanks for that, John. It's funny, I don't know how you are, Jim. I am terrible at this. I'm always impressed with John, and for years, before John even had his own podcast, I've always really enjoyed his commentary on sales numbers and how that works, because I'm not a statistics kind of guy. So it's fun for me to see somebody else who's energetic about it to kind of break it down for me. It's one of the things that I've talked about on the show many times. It drives me nuts what we consider top sellers, what their numbers are, because I don't think it matches the quality of comics now. I think Flashpoint as an event overall, all of the titles with Flashpoint, I think are going to see booming sales numbers because this is the event. It's going to be one of those big summer events. People are going to be drawn to it. I think what's going to happen is I think all these titles are going to do well. And it's going to drive down sales, unfortunately, of other titles because everyone's going to be... And I think it's why DC canceled a lot of their lower-selling titles, figuring let's, make sure our bigger-selling books don't take too deep of a hit.
Right. By
doing this, figuring that some people are going to be making some adjustments to the Flashpoint event.
Yeah, looking at just the overall picture and looking at all the massive number of titles we got coming, this is going to be an interesting summer just seeing how things react and what people go with and what they pick. Because I know when I first started seeing some of these titles, I was always planning on getting them just because I want the full story. I like reading the full story, and I'm like, let's go for this. But there was a couple of titles that I had no idea who it was or really what was going on with it, and I have to say I wasn't that excited, but as we get more and more sneak peeks, a couple of the stuff that I was just passing off, I'm now going, ooh, that looks pretty good. I'm wondering where that's going to go. So this is going to be an interesting experiment.
I think what's going to wind up happening with this event is characters that have a bigger role in the main mini. We're going to see a lot of reordering of the one-shots and things like that, maybe second printings and things. I think that what John's saying makes a lot of sense to me. Your God of War, your Canterbury Cricket, stuff like that. I think the oddball ones are going to see a smaller initial order of those books, but then potential reorders depending on their placement in that. Yeah. I think your bigger sellers at first are going to be your bigger orders at first by retailers are going to be like your Batman book, your Aquaman book, the Wonder Woman book. A lot of the characters they've spotlighted already with action figures, I think are going to be ones that I think that your retailers are saying people are going to be drawn to these right away because they're main DC characters, the Project Superman. Any of the ones that spotlight and highlight those characters, Abin Sur, Hal Jordan.
I was going to say the Lois Lane one.
Yes.
I've heard a lot of people talking in the various forums and chat rooms and whatnot about they're curious what's going to happen with Lois because she in herself is a very strong and recognizable character. So they're giving a little chance to kind of flex the creative muscle with Lois Lane. Plus, that's also going to be kind of an explanation on what happened to Europe. It sounds like in that book. So I'm thinking that's going to be another one that's going to be a top seller and do really well.
I think your Booster Gold is going to be a book that I think is going to do well because of this. I think what's going to happen is retailers might order some extra initially, but I think they're going to order low on that again. Mm-hmm. And I think what's going to happen is that's going to be another one where it's going to go maybe into second printing or reorders because people are going to have a higher interest in it because of the tie-in to Flashpoint. So I think that's going to be another book. Now, where do you rank books like Dead Man and the Flying Graysons as far as Citizen Cold, Deathstroke? I'm guessing Flying Graysons might pull some retailers to say, okay, it's Dick Grayson, he's currently Batman, people are going to be interested in him, so I guess that we can put... Would you bump that up into the top tier ones as well? Like retailers are probably going to order higher on that?
See, I would say yes. Well, my initial gut was no, because Dead Man and the Flying Graysons makes it sound like it's not going to be Dick Grayson, but I think this is going to be a Dick Grayson story. Maybe Dick Grayson will become Dead Man in all of this, and not... what's his real name? I can't think of it off the top of my head. Not
Boston Brand?
Thank you. Maybe Boston Brand won't be the Dead Man. Maybe it'll be Dick Grayson. So I think that just the Flying Graysons is going to draw people in, and it'll probably be a pretty good seller. Whatever, I figure your number of the people who are buying the Batman and Robin books, or the people who are buying the Batman title will gravitate towards that because that's Dick Grayson. Whereas, like,
I'm talking about retailer orders, though.
Yeah. Well,
I'm thinking like a
retailer. So I'm thinking, okay, I got my numbers of the people who are buying Batman and Robin, who are buying Batman. Those same numbers are probably gonna want to pick up this Grayson story because they're getting Grayson in the regular universe. They're gonna want that. So I'm gonna make sure whatever those normal numbers I would need to cover those titles, that's what I'm gonna want in the Flying Graysons.
Mm-hmm. Because, I mean, they've got to sit there and they're going to try to make sure they have enough on there for all their regular pulls and then a couple extra issues to have on the shelf, for your casual walk-ins and things like that. So it's got to be a tough order for retailers. I do think he's right. God of War, your Canterbury Cricket and things like that are probably going to be ordered lower. But I think what's going to end up happening is... let me ask you this, like Reverse Flash. A retailer, do you see them ordering that high? Or, because it's a one-shot. It's not a full-blown mini. How do you see that?
I see Reverse Flash being ordered high just because of his direct connection to Flashpoint. And especially since it is a one-shot, people don't have to make a large financial commitment to multiple issues. They say, hey, this is Reverse Flash. This is the guy who's probably causing Flashpoint. I want to make sure I get that title. So that's, I think, a story that's definitely going to have a higher sell and will be in one of the upper tiers, just because it seems to me have a more direct tie to Flashpoint. Now with Citizen Cold,
well, all of these have a direct tie to Flashpoint in the sense of showing the world. See, here's the thing: where the Reverse Flash one, it could be a one shot that focuses on how Flashpoint affects Reverse Flash.
It could be, but when I'm looking at it, I'm thinking in my mind that it's a connection to the actual Flashpoint miniseries, a direct connection to that. And when I mean connection to Flashpoint, that's what I'm talking about. Stories that everything is connected to Flashpoint, but I think part of...
But they said, and Johns has been quoted as saying this, these one-shots and these stories that are off the side are more fleshing out the world around Flashpoint. The main mini is where all the big events are happening.
Right.
Now, I guess you're right with the one-shots, though, like we've seen in Sinestro Corps War. These are stories that maybe directly connect to the main mini as far as they might flesh out certain sequences or things like that.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking about by fleshing out and the story and the direct connection. It's that kind of stories.
What about, like, your Kid Flash book? Where do you think that's going to be?
Well, that's another one where initially when I heard it, I was worried it was going to do the sales weren't going to do so well, just because I'm thinking if you're not everybody who's a Flash fan may not be a Kid Flash fan because Bart is so different than
these are retailer orders though.
Right,
so you're going into how well it's going to do. How do you think to me, if I'm a retailer, I'm ordering pretty high on all of these, figuring that most people are going to be reading Flashpoint. I am going to order less of... I am going to go for my top-tier DC heroes. So a lot of the ones we shot out in the beginning, I think are going to be your highest orders. I think Kid Flash, from a retailer end, I've got to look at that and say, okay, it's a Flash character. So I've got to order this because I think people are going to be interested in it. I'm putting this there with things like Captain Cold and Heatwave. I don't think those are going to be ordered as high as some of the other minis. I think they're going to be part of the second tier. Maybe where your Dead Man and the Flying Graysons are going to fall, like what you were talking about,
well, see,
as far as orders.
When I was first thinking of Flash, that's where I was thinking. I was thinking a middle tier. But as I started just thinking more into it, I'm thinking Kid Flash is going to be another one of those titles that we're going to see what's going on with him. And there's a connection with Kid Flash. I think he's gonna have a bigger role than we think. And what's gonna happen is people are going to realize this once already into it, and then do a massive run to it. So if I'm a retailer, I'm gonna want to have a little bit more than the middle level on Kid Flash, just so I don't have to do that reorder. Just so I'm the one in town that has the book.
But do you think all retailers are going to take that stance?
No, this is my how I would handle, if I was a retail order. I would probably be a little bit more aggressive than, your typical, local comic shop. And the reason I'm that way is because I don't actually have a comic shop to worry about, because one of the worst things on any retail environment is overhead, and you're carrying, when you order too much of a product and it's just sitting there not moving off the shelves, because you're paying for, your cost of goods, and it's just a killer on you just to store, something that isn't selling. And especially with an event like this, if you have this comic that doesn't sell and just sits there, it's going to sit there for a while. Once we're past the initial hit of the Flashpoint, once Flashpoint's over, we'll get a couple people who will come in afterwards, but as a general rule, it's done. So if you order too heavy on it, you're gonna be sitting there with these comics that you can't get rid of.
I think what's going to end up happening is you're making exactly a lot of sense. I think what's going to end up happening is the first issue is going to come out, and between issue 1 and issue 2 of the main mini I'm talking about, I think there's going to be some shocking characters that maybe have a bigger role in it than we're realizing.
Right.
That might be appearing in some of these other minis, where all of a sudden we're going to see, geez, we should have been reading this because I want to know more about this character now than maybe when I was initially ordering. That's where I was saying we're going to see, I think with a number of these minis, we're going to see reorders coming in from retailers where they didn't order enough. And I think we're going to see them be conservative on some of them, where it's an odder character. What about a World of Flashpoint? Do you think a retailer is going to order that high, or are going to order that more of a middle tier?
I'm thinking high on that one as well. And just because if someone's not getting all of the other minis, and they're not getting all the other ones, but they still just want to see what's going on in DC Universe, that's a good title to pick up. Plus, you also get the people who are ordering all of the minis want to pick that up. So you have just nice, you have a mixture of people who are getting some minis and people who aren't getting some minis who would have an interest in it. Just because it's a nice general story, let me just get an idea of what the other universe is like and what's going on out there. Maybe that'll lead me to some other title. So I see that one kind of being a gateway to possibly leading people to pick up other titles, but you feel more comfortable picking up the World of Flashpoint, just saying, okay, I'm going to get this. This will give me an idea of what's going on out there, so I don't have to buy this other stuff. So I think it's got a lot of appeal to people. I would order high.
So bottom tier retail orders so far, I'm looking at things like Canterbury Cricket, which I'm incredibly interested in,
big time. But
I think it's going to be one of those things where a retailer's going to be like, name recognition, all that, it might sell low. I think we might see potential reorders on that one.
That Outsider, I think
is going to be in the lower tier.
Frankenstein, I think, is going to be on the lower tier, even though I'm really curious because that looks more like, it's kind of like, reminds me of sort of a Buffy type of feel to it, where Frankenstein and his team, or whoever's on his team, is fighting the undead type of stuff. So I'm looking forward to that. I'm kind of curious about that.
Yeah, it's Frankenstein, Creatures of the Unknown.
Yeah.
And I'm excited about that just because the creator, Jeff Lemire, writing on that one. I'm like, Which, so I don't, it's interesting to try. No, Green Arrow, where do you think that's going to fall?
I would say middle tier, because Green Arrow, I think, has probably slipped off in his popularity. He's not, I think it's a cool, I'm enjoying the title, and I think he's a cool character, but I think as an overall opinion, people are probably, not so, hard up on, they're like, I've got to get more Green Arrow. They're not the hardcore fans, of Green Arrow. I think that we've lost some of those hardcore fans with everything that's happened to him, and you start thinking about, one of the things I started thinking about, what can they really change with Ali? By having this whole Flashpoint. If he's still an archer, he's still shooting the bow, he's still Queen Industry, he's done a variety of stuff already. Where is it going to change it? But
it says he makes money from war.
Yeah, so maybe they're doing a heel turn on Ali. Maybe this whole thing kind of, I don't know. He either got a little more corrupted. Maybe there's some, I don't know. But I don't think, I'm thinking middle range on that one. And same thing with the Deathstroke, even though I love Deathstroke as a villain, and I think he's a great character and he's fun, but I see him being a middle order just because there's so much out there. I'm going to focus on the hero, not the villain.
See, those are books that I see potentially having reorder.
Big time, yeah.
Because I think what's going to end up happening is I think retailers are going to be surprised on the books that people get interested in. And I think it's going to be very hard for a retailer to predict that. I actually agree with you. I think those are going to be middle or low tier or initial orders where I think retailers are going to make a mistake. And I think what's going to end up happening is the excitement of the main event is going to decide people who maybe... Because I think what's going to happen is a lot of your comic book shops, your comic book retailers have pre-order pull lists that they're... they'll say, hey, pull this book for me, set this aside. So I think enough of your initial orders, people are going to come in and say, hey, I want this. And they'll order a couple more than their initial pull list people, just to have some of them on the shelf. And I think what's going to end up happening is you're going to have some people who maybe pulled only the mini at first or pulled selected minis who are going to get, if they get very heavily into the event, are going to say, you know what, on second thought, I kind of want to get the other ones I didn't get. So you're going to see those people who have pull lists in your comic shop going over to the shelf and grabbing books that maybe they initially thought they weren't going to, but it's going to be the quality of the event that's going to drive that.
Big time.
Because, there's a lot of times where I'll sit there and go, and I'm not talking about now for the show. I tend to pull those things for the show. But I know being in the comic shop when I've, followed a Marvel or DC event and they've had tie-ins like that, if I'm really digging the event, I'll pick up titles I don't normally grab just to get the whole picture.
Yeah.
Even if it is like this is a side story. Well, I kind of want the side story then because the world that they've crafted for me is cool enough to warrant that. So I do think this is going to be an event where you're right. We're going to have a lot of these middle and low tier ones that are going to get reorders.
Yeah,
and we're going to see second printings if the DC didn't even print. If DC printed based on initial orders, I think we're going to see second printings of certain books, which is good for the collector too because those are the ones where people like to track. Which books are going to be the ones that go up in value? Well, it's going to be the ones that go into first, second, and third printing that people kind of get into.
Let me ask you a question. Because I don't do this, but I'm always tempted to whenever they start doing second and third printings, and I have the first printing. I'm always tempted to get the second and third printing, just so I have the full set of the first, second, and third printing of them. Have you ever been? Do you do that or get tempted to do
Dark
that?
Knight Returns, I did that.
Oh, okay.
There's been other books where I have too. Rebirth. I'll tell you, Green Lantern Rebirth. When that came out, they did different covers. See, that's what'll drive it more so than the printing. If there's a particularly cool cover by an artist that I really enjoy, I will grab the second or third printing for the cover, kind of like what we do with variants.
Yeah.
Like if you buy a cool variant, because you figure you're still getting it cover price. So I may do that. I may buy a reorder because, wow, that cover's really cool. So it's more of the artwork that drives that. I've never done it to have a complete set. I'm sure there's people that do, that are like, I like the complete set. So no, I don't do that. I did do it with Dark Knight Returns, and I don't know why. Where I bought multiple printings of that. I don't have a real good reason for that. And I don't think it was a real rational reason at the time either. I was in high school, so I'll just kind of say that was the reason and just go for that. Because I can't think, I don't really have a good thought process on the whole thing, other than the story at the time when it came out. To be there in the comic shop as that book was coming out was an event and a half. This is Batman in his future coming back into his own. The night is mine again. All that stuff. I'm like, whoa. So there was that. But no, I don't feel this overwhelming need to have all the printings except for covers. Covers will drive it.
Yeah.
Have you bought because of covers or for any reason?
I bought definitely because of covers. And they, if I see a different cover that I really like, oh, that looks cool, I'll grab that. But there's been times when a second or third printing of something will come out, and I'm sitting there and I want to order but I don't because I'm like, I already have it. And it's like the same cover. Mm-hmm. Or if it's a different cover, it's not somebody I know the artist or, that. You
know why I used to do it? Actually, I do have a reason why I used to do it. I used to do it with the theory that I would probably sell my first printings because they would be worth more money, and then I would have my reading copy. So why did I do it for Dark Knight Returns? Now I remember. Oh, okay. That was my thinking at the time was that I would sell, and I still have my first run, so that tells you how well that worked out for me.
So that's why sometimes...
And I'm an eBayer. I actually do, like, if I buy a collected edition or something, I'll start bundling up my comics and, like, selling... full runs of things that I've maybe bought in trades or have been collecting, into another format, or hardcovers or whatever. Like something comes out in an absolute. Like I sold Hush. my whole Hush run, because I have the Absolute. I don't need... if I'm going to read it, I'm going to read the Absolute. Why would I go back and read the regular-sized comics when I can have that beautiful, gorgeous art?
Well, I have the Absolute Hush. I went back and I bought, I found, bin diving and websites and whatnot, and I have that, so I have both of those. Then I have the first issue of Hush, the one cover. I bought an extra one of those just in case I ever meet the creative team. I can get that signed.
That's
so
cool.
I've got multiple Hush. I have multiple versions of,
and I've got books where I've got those, and I'll probably never part with them. The honest truth as to why would I eBay stuff now? It's financial reasons. It's periodically during the time I'll start doing a purge through my comic collection because I'm recollecting things. And it could be that I just know, like this month in particular, a lot of collected editions coming out this month.
Yeah.
There's that Shade Omnibus that I'm very interested in, which, that's going to be a character in that Secret 7.
Yeah.
Is it Secret 6 or Secret 7?
Secret 7.
Secret 7 Flashpoint title. He's going to be featured in there. And these are the original Steve Ditko issues. I've never read them. So I'm like, and then there's that Teen Titans Omnibus, which is collecting the first 16 issues plus the DC Comics Presents leading into it of Wolfman and Perez's run on Titans, which is stellar. Very edgy. Did you order that?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And then there's the 5th volume of Sandman.
Yeah.
Which collects the Sandman Mystery Theater one-shot, or Sandman Mystery Theater? Yeah, Sandman Mystery Theater. And it was, the Golden Age Sandman had a story arc, and it was written by Neil Gaiman and Matt Wagner. And it was told, the events of the initial opening of Sandman were told from the perspective of the Golden Age Sandman. So there were actual things where you got to see it from a different take and a different angle, and it was very cool. But it also collects some of the work that's come later that Neil Gaiman's done that has been, published in comic book form. So that'll complete the collection because they have the Death volume as well of all the Neil Gaiman Sandman work. So I gotta not grab that because those volumes have just been stellar. Absolutes tend to
they
catch my
get
eye.
me, and even if it's an absolute of something I've never read even, I'm like, ooh. So I'll start scanning my memory. I'm like, has Sean ever talked about this? And if you've ever, really talked and been excited about something coming out, I'll actually, look and think about grabbing an absolute that I know no idea anything about the story just because I'm like, okay, let me look who did the writing, who did the art on this. And I did
that with Planetary.
Yeah,
I bought the first two Absolute Planetary volumes. I'd never read Planetary before, but I'd heard so many good things about Planetary that my first experience reading Planetary has been through the Absolute editions, and they're stunning.
Yeah.
Just great volumes for that. Promethea is one that I read Promethea when it was out, but I'm actually finishing it through Absolute volumes, which is kind of a fun way to read it, because it was one of the things budget-wise when it was out, when the ABC Comics were out, I wasn't able to keep following them all the way through. My budget just wasn't able to handle it at the time, so I never finished reading Promethea, and I'm now able to finish it through Absolute volumes. But that's what a great way to read a book. Be a scary world if everything was published in Absolutes because of how expensive they are. But it's great. But they're
It'd be
great.
a wonderful world.
Yeah, but they're great volumes. I'm glad to see that program is continuing. It was one of those that I was afraid was going to fizzle. And it's really, to me, just a gorgeous way for top-tier stories to be recollected. I know this Flashpoint thing, I would hate to be a retailer trying to order for any big event. Yeah. Because you want to have, obviously, your goal is to have units on hand to make the sale at the time. So it's a very tough decision to say which one's the one, and hoping that you didn't miss the one that is going to have
everybody wants. Yeah.
Well, it's going to be some quirky character that all of a sudden has a major role in the series, and all of a sudden everybody's like, "Hey, I want to read this." It's not there, so it's a tough one to do the ordering from. I do think it's going to wind up in 3 different categories where there's going to be the main top ones, then there's going to be the middle group and the bottom group that we were talking about, or it's going to be the quirkier characters. I agree. Deathstroke is an interesting one because I don't know if he'll wind up in the middle or the bottom tier.
Yeah. Yeah, he's a great character, but again, it's one of those, what are they going to do with him? Is this really something I need to read? How are they going to change around this villain? Even if they make him a hero, there's been moments of Deathstroke where he's been kind of heroic. So is it really a big change? So I don't know what they're going to do with the character, where they're going to put him, or if he's a mystery.
Do you think any of the Flashpoint titles are going to be low orders in comparison to the other top 300? I think my personal opinion is I think we're going to see really nice numbers on all of the Flashpoint titles. I think it is going to break down into 3 different categories as far as where the numbers go, and I think that you're going to see like groupings of them. We're going to see bam, 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 3 different sections, and I'll be curious to see if I'm right on that.
See, I think the lower tiered stuff is going to be under your Action Comics or under Superman. Under your lower tier of Flashpoint's not going to beat the upper or middle tier of. And
we're talking about not just DC. We're also talking Marvel and Image and all books across the board.
I don't think about independent, but I think like that.
I actually really do think about independent books. Actually, those are the ones I'm worried about when these type of events come out, because I think what ends up happening is, unfortunately, this will pull people away from maybe those extra 1 or 2 titles that they normally try out each month. So I love events. And I'm excited as can be for this event, but I am afraid for. Let's just talk on the DC end for a moment. I'm afraid for some of my DC titles that, like, a book I get afraid for this type of thing, a Jonah Hex.
Yeah.
Where it's
Thunder Agents.
Thunder Agents, yeah, exactly. Books like that in this type of event, I'm not, obviously the ones that have already been canceled I'm not worried about because they've already been canceled. But, some of my titles...
stuff. Some of the Vertigo stuff.
Yeah, that skirt the line, yeah.
They may take a hit just because people who are doing both Vertigo and DC, like, well, I'm going with this event, so I got to drop my Vertigo titles, or I got to drop something like that. So those have a risk as well.
Yeah. So I do think that's where whenever the big events come out, I love big events, and I'm just as guilty of it. I end up grabbing, the big event books because I want the big story, and it's great to see some interesting new creators having a shot at some titles on this. I do think, I guess back to my original point, though, I agree with you that I think what's going to happen is like your middle tier and lower tier Flashpoint titles aren't going to do as well as, say, your Action Comics, your Batmans, things like that, and just on the DC end, and then the Marvels that are comparable, because there's going to be those. But I do think that they're going to have respectable numbers on the top 300.
Yeah, I think so. I think this is definitely going to this is going to be a good event, I say, for DC. Just one, it's, people like these. Well, I think people like these stories where they kind of flip the universe upside down. 2, it's got Jeff Johns' name on it, so usually there's a lot of in Johns we trust, belief out there. So if he's at the helm of the event, I'm like, okay, I trust this event. So you got people who are going to come in that way, and I think DC is on a relatively hot streak with some really good events. So I think I'm saying in the top 300, DC, this Flashpoint event's going to do very well.
You've got like your Jimmy Palmiotti's, your Jeff Lemire, Scott Snyder, on your JT Cruel, on these minis. And I like, there's some lesser known names as far as, people I'm not used to seeing writing DC characters currently who are having a shot at doing this. Some of the editors taking a shot as well at doing some writing. Those are always fun. It's kind of cool to see what is their take. It's a different writing on that. And some art teams that we're not used to seeing, or maybe we haven't seen for a while working on DC. This event is supposed to be major changes for the universe afterwards. So, for me, all eyes are on it.
Yeah,
and I think that is going to affect sale numbers. I think it's going to affect retail orders.
What it changes is also going to be the post-event stuff is going to be interesting.
Mm-hmm. I think it's going to have a heavy effect on sales numbers of books post the event. Now, back to it, and I don't know that Booster Gold, where do you think it will fall in this? Do you think it's top, middle, or low tier?
I think Booster's going to be top. I think this event, I predict, will help Booster in his numbers. I'm not sure where Booster sits right now, but if you're dealing with a time event, you're dealing with some change in time, and you got a cool character like Booster, I think people are going to gravitate to that, seeing how he deals with it, especially because he's one of those characters that I see having a direct correlation to, the actual event itself, and having that direct kind of feed where, like, you read Booster along with this, you get a little bit more, oh yeah, that's kind of cool, and just, I think this is going to be a good shot for Booster. I see orders for
Booster initially being lower, though, than they will be as the event goes on. Because I think people, like retailers who normally order Booster low, are going to probably continue to do that. Maybe order a couple extra copies, thinking that we might get a little bit of action on it. And because it's not called Flashpoint Booster Gold. So I think a retailer who's going through lists saying, okay, Booster's a low-selling book for me. I'm going to order my normal numbers for Booster, maybe a couple more. And I think that's going to be a book we're going to see some reorders on.
It could be.
Potentially a second printing where, it's all of a sudden going to be like, wow, out of nowhere, Boosters, people are, really looking for it. Because he's going to be a tie to, besides Barry in the main Flashpoint mini, he's going to be our direct tie to the main universe, because he's going to be somebody from our universe who is also aware of what is going on. So that's a perspective that you can't miss. Yeah. And I think retailers are going to order that one low, and I think we're going to have to see some potential reorders on that one. Whereas I think as the event goes on, I think the orders will start to match what retailers are actually selling. So I think 2 or 3 issues in to Flashpoint, we're going to see more action on Booster, sales-wise. I'm curious to see if I'm right on that one.
We are Crystal Men from Mercury. We have no quarrel with you.
Once again, we are proud members of the Comics Podcast Network and the League of Comic Book Podcasts. I also want to remind everyone to check out the Hero Initiative. That's heroinitiative.org, and the Comic Book Legal Defense Fund at cbldf.org. There's a handy-dandy link in our Raging Bullets charities section, so please make sure to check out those organizations. Also this week on the website, we're going to be having we have a brand new Where's Whatnot now that's absolutely hysterical from friend of the show, Mike Sims. Plus we have some convention photos. They'll be going up over the next couple of days of the release of this particular podcast episode. So please make sure to check some of those out. Sponsoring us this episode is tcbservice.com. Be sure to check out the brand new deals for May. They're going to be going up on the website. And if you didn't order Project Superman, remember that's $2.99, 40% off, only $1.79. It's a great way to get that book at a deal. Don't forget to check out InStockTrades.com, where you can pick up Art Lyon's work on Batman the Widening Gyre hardcover, Volume 1. And remember, his website is artlyonart.com. You can check out his upcoming projects. Batman the Widening Gyre hardcover is $19.99 regularly, 38% off, only $12.39. That's InStockTrades.com, where orders of $50 or more can get you free shipping. And you can pick up some of Art's other work on their website as well, so be sure to be checking that out over at InStockTrades.com. Don't forget to check out the Summit City Comic Con. It's going to be coming this summer. SummitCityComicCon.com. Our friends from DCB Service and InStockTrades.com are putting that on. And we will see everyone next week.
Bye!
Through space and time, 1,000 different lifetimes. Faded for love and flaws and incredibly clear sightlines. Swinging your mace around, such a practical outlook. Helping the JSA and occasionally supporting your own book. Hawkman, Hawkman. Eagle eyes can't see. Hawkman, your plan. What you do to me, Hawkman. The villains are closing in, be they Thanin Guard or Egyptian. Working so hard to thwart you and Hawkgirl's mission. The odds are not on your side, and danger seems to stack up. Things would be so much easier if you would just call for backup. Hawkman, Hawkman. Eagle eyes can't see your plan and what you do to me. Hawkman, Hawkman. Eagle eyes can't see. Hawkman, your plan and what you do to me. Hawkman. Talking about Hawkman.